What if the deep, persistent unfairness we all see in society isn't just about bad policies or a few corrupt people? What if the problem is baked right into the core code of how we govern ourselves? Today, we are diving into a pretty radical new framework that's designed to reboot that entire system. It's called the Regit Probabilistic Governance Model, or RPGM for short, and it's proposing nothing less than a full operating system upgrade for the state. So let's unpack how it's supposed to work.
Here's our game plan. First, we'll dig into the problem itself, why the odds feel so stacked against so many people. Then, we'll introduce the RPGM as this big systemic fix. After that, we'll explore its three main innovations, see how it's different from other models out there, and finally, we'll step back and do a real expert assessment of its potential and, just as importantly, the massive hurdles it would face.
All right, so first things first, why do we even need a whole new model in the first place? Well, the core argument behind RPGM is that the problem of inequality isn't just political. It's actually structural. It's all about how probability and risk are spread out in a way that's just fundamentally unfair. And this slide just nails a key part of the problem, what we can call the asymmetry of risk. Think about it. A farmer might take out a relatively small loan, right? But one bad harvest, one drought, and they could face complete and total ruin. The system gives them almost no safety net. But on the flip side, a banker can make disastrous multi-billion-dollar loans. And what often happens? The state steps in with a bailout. It's a system where all the risk gets pushed down to the most vulnerable, while the most powerful are basically insulated from their own failures.
This really brings us to a huge question, doesn't it? Is success really just about how hard you work? The whole idea behind RPGM is that for a huge number of people, the game is rigged from the very beginning by these stacked probabilities.
Okay, so let's try to put some numbers on this. Imagine your chance of building a successful life depends on a few key things. Let's start with getting access to a quality education. And you know what? Let's be really generous and just call it a coin flip, a 50% shot.
Okay, next up, having a favorable cognitive endowment. This is just something you're born with, totally out of your control. The probability of being, say, in the top 10% is, well, by definition, it's 10%.
And then there's the third piece, having a supportive family environment that can actually nurture all that potential. Again, something you have absolutely no say in. Let's give that another 10% probability.
Now here is the absolute kicker. You don't add these chances together. You have to multiply them. So your probability of getting all three of these advantages isn't 70%. It's 0.5 times 0.1 times 0.1, which comes out to a staggering 0.005%. This isn't just a feeling that the system is unfair. This calculation suggests that structural disadvantage is a cold, hard, mathematical reality.
And this is exactly where the RPGM comes into the picture. If the problem is in the system's core programming, you need more than just a software patch. You need a whole new operating system. And RPGM is being proposed as that very upgrade, one that's designed from the ground up to rewrite the basic rules of fairness.
So how in the world does this thing actually work? Well, the whole architecture is built on three core interconnected ideas or innovations.
And here are the three pillars. First, you have the Probabilistic Equalization Mechanism, or PEM, which is designed to tackle that math problem we just walked through. Second, there's the Regit Ethical Filter, which acts as a kind of moral checkpoint for all new laws. And third, you have the Permanent Citizens Council, or PCC, which is a totally new way of sharing power.
So let's look at the PEM first. This is really the statistical heart of the whole model. The argument is that one person, one vote isn't really equal if some people are starting life with a 0.005% chance of success, while others have much, much better odds. So, the PEM is designed to give a statistically elevated voice to communities that face those huge structural barriers, think rural or poor groups, to systematically correct for that initial disadvantage. It's not one person, one vote, it's a probability-adjusted voice.
Okay, next is the Regit Ethical Filter. You can think of this as a mandatory checkpoint, a firewall that every single proposed policy has to pass. Before any law can even be considered, it has to get through three gates. First, trust. Does this policy actually build trust between people and the state? Second, ethics. Does it actively protect the most vulnerable people in society? And third, necessity. Is this thing actually essential for our collective survival and progress? The whole point is to embed morality directly into the machinery of government itself. And the third innovation is the Permanent Citizens Council. Now, this would be a large group of, say, 1 to 2,000 ordinary citizens, chosen and rotated every few years. For day-to-day policy, their role is advisory. But, and this is the really radical part, their decisions are binding on issues that have a generational impact, things like climate change or massive infrastructure projects. The whole thing would be supported by advanced AI platforms, and it's designed to share real power and act as a kind of institutional memory. You know how governments always seem to forget the lessons of the last crisis? This is designed to prevent that post-crisis amnesia.
So, we have these three big components. But how does this all add up to something that's actually different from the models we already know? Let's do a quick comparison with some common alternatives.
This table really gets to the heart of what makes RPGM unique. For example, unlike a local federalism model, which can easily be captured by local elites, RPGM uses a nationally scaled citizens' council to try and prevent that. And unlike the Nordic model, which really depends on a high level of social trust that might not exist everywhere, RPGM tries to build that trust by embedding fairness rules into the system first, before you even get to big redistribution policies. And finally, unlike a top-down technocracy like Dubai's, RPGM explicitly shares power through the Citizens' Council, elevating the citizens' voice instead of concentrating it at the top.
Now, I know this all sounds incredibly ambitious, maybe even a bit sci-fi. So, putting on an expert hat here, it's absolutely crucial that we assess not just the promise of this framework, but also the massive, practical and scientific challenges of ever actually putting a system like this into practice.
On the one hand, the potential is huge. I mean, this is a system designed to correct those deep-seated inequalities, not just put a Band-Aid on them. By its very design, it makes it statistically harder for elites to capture the system. And maybe most importantly, it tries to embed morality into the system itself, so you're not just hoping you elect good, virtuous politicians. It aims to reboot the whole system for what the model calls the ethical middle.
But, and this is a huge but, the hurdles are just immense. The number one challenge is just operationalizing it. How do you scientifically calculate and assign a numerical value to disadvantage for the PEM without just creating a whole new set of biases? That question alone would require a colossal research effort across sociology, data science, and ethics. Then you have the legal questions. How does a citizens' council with binding authority even work alongside a constitution? And technologically, building a secure, unbiased AI platform to support this, that's a grand challenge in computer science. Honestly, the next scientific step isn't even a pilot program. It's doing the foundational research in each of these areas to see if the core ideas are even possible.
So in the end, it really all comes back to this central metaphor. You know, traditional reforms are like bug fixes. They solve individual problems here and there. What RPGM is proposing is a complete operating system upgrade that rewrites the fundamental code to favor the average user, not just the system administrators.
And that, right there, brings us to the ultimate challenge. Designing a new, elegant code for governance is one thing, but actually installing it into the messy, complicated, and conflicted hardware of a real-world political system, that's another thing entirely. And that's the profound question a model like this leaves us with. Could we ever truly debug democracy itself?